Welcome to the Art and Science of Retail with Ken Pilot. We're going to jump right in, no lengthy introductions here. So couple of housekeeping items. The format, in case you forgot from when you registered or you didn't really pay attention because you saw Ken was going to be here and you were like, I'm in. But what we're going to do is there's going to be about 15 minutes of Ken talking about his thoughts on the art and science of retail, and I'll field questions to him. We've already gotten some questions ahead of the webinar. Thank you for my proactive folks who came. And so I'll weave those into the conversation as best as I can, but we're sort of targeting 15-ish minutes for the beginning where Ken just kind of soliloquies and talks about his experience and what he's seeing in the market. And then we'll take questions from the audience. And actually, although I said, and then, there's no need to delay. So if you have questions right now, or you came to the webinar with questions in mind, already jotted out, pop them into either the chat or the Q&A. I don't care which one you use. I'm comfortable with both, and I will weave them into the conversation as best as I can, or we'll wait till the end and we'll kind of do like a grab bag session where basically all of the audience's burning questions get answered. So jot away as we're talking, before, after, all the things. And really the goal of this entire session is to get your questions answered. Retail is an extremely challenging place to be right now. And so we want to help. And so Twilio in general is a technology. We believe that the right tool can change everything, but sometimes technology is not the answer. Sometimes it's a smart brain who has a tremendous amount of experience that you can just ask your questions to. And that's why Ken's here and why we put on this little webinar today. So the other goal is to connect you with Ken, who is about to go into his experience in case you're unfamiliar with just the degree of industry veteran thought leader that we have with us today. He's very selective about who he accepts on LinkedIn. So if you do connect with him during or after this, please mention the webinar so he knows that you're the kind of person who's interested in learning and growing in this kind of way. So those are the housekeeping items. The biggest thing, chat your questions into me and I will field them for you. And who am I, by the way? I'm Andrea Lechner-Becker. I run marketing here at Twilio, but I'm really just the conduit between you and Ken. So I am here mostly to moderate. Ken is really the star of this show. And so without further ado, Ken, let's get right into it. So I thought we'd start with a really challenging project for you, which is to boil down decades and decades of experience into like 1 or 2 minutes of like where you started and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, is this clock ready?
Yes.
Okay. So started my retail career with Macy's, went through the Macy's training program. Started in where was I? Oh, I was in Herald Square. I was the department manager of men's sporting goods, which sounded like a great job until I realized no one had ever been promoted from that area. And I was the 21st manager to try it. Fortunately, I got lucky and was able to move through the organization, different positions, was there for about 5 years, left as a buyer, and then spent the next 13 years at Gap. Started as an assistant merchandise manager at Gap, and then ultimately was responsible for Gap brand global. And we were in 6 countries at the time. In about 2002, I left to join J.Crew as the CEO, which I thought was a good idea at the time. But Mickey Drexler also thought it was a good idea at the time. And about 4 months after I started, he came to be chairman of the board of J.Crew, and I decided to look for something else to do and landed my next job at Ralph Lauren, where I was president of new business development and also their factory store division, which is the one that makes the money for the company. Spent about 2 years there, launched Rugby with working for both Roger Farah and Ralph Lauren. It was a great experience, a lot of fun, a lot of energy. But I couldn't turn down the next opportunity, which was with American Eagle to launch a new brand, which became known as Martin & Osa. A good idea at the time, wasn't the best execution. I can take responsibility for that. We did open 5 stores. I left the company after about 2 years, and about a year after I left, they closed down the division. I got out of retail, apparel retail altogether at that time, and did a quick startup. Launched a business with a friend of mine in the toy space called Robot Galaxy. Think Build-A-Bear for boys. Boys needed to do something just like girls were doing something in the mall. We raised $7 million of private equity money, took on strategic investors, opened up 2 locations within a week of each other. Unfortunately, that was in 2008. So we picked not the best timing to launch a new business. I opened up a 3rd location in Times Square, Toys R Us. We had a term sheet with Disney, but when the world came to an end in 2009, so did our term sheet. So there was no exit there, unfortunately. Took a little bit of time, then pivoted over to the home space where I was president at ABC Carpet Home for 5 years, helped turn the business around from being unprofitable to profitable. Like other retailers, they suffered during the recession of 2008, 2009, but we came back strong through 2015. At that point, I got out of organized retail, as I like to call it, altogether. Started my own business, advising retail brands, helping them scale, but also what I found to be more interesting and more important, began investing in technology platforms that really support the retail ecosystem. And it's kind of what I'm doing today. So advising brands, investing in tech platforms that support online stores, operations, and process, as well as doing a couple of events, which maybe I'll go into later. I don't know. I'm staying busy. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. And so your breadth of experience is extensive. And so this whole webinar is art and science, because I know that's something that you're passionate about. So what would you consider yourself? What percentage art versus science are you?
The majority art, I'd say probably, if I had to break it down, because I know you're going to push me on that, probably 45% art. And that's because I believe brands really start with great product, or they end without it. So art being number 1, 2, and 3 for me. I'd rather be in a product meeting than anywhere else within the organization. That said, I appreciate the importance of science, of leveraging tools as they're available, and that's really changed over my lifetime, leveraging tools to really help you make better decisions. So I guess back in the day, so to speak, not to age myself more than I need to. And please don't do the math and look and say, oh, I graduated Colgate in 1983, because you'll realize like I'm an old dude. But I would say probably back in the day would have been about 65% art and 35% science. Over the past years, I think there's a whole 3rd category that comes into play, which is technology. So it's art, it's science, and technology. And I've seen the move from science to technology, or what was being done that felt scientific is now replaced by, more than likely, a platform. So I think that today I'd probably consider myself still about 40% product, which would be art, maybe 25% science, and then the remainder, I don't know, that must be, I guess math isn't one, but I think that's about 35. That would be tech, because I've really gotten so, I don't know, juiced up around technology. And I was really never into technology. Like, I always knew it was important, but never really wanted to be that involved. The CTO was, some guy who kept the point of sale thing running in the stores, but it was just not a passion. And now I kind of become a geek, which is sort of embarrassing, but I love technology. I invest in technology, and I invest in companies who I believe solve a problem and have a platform that I would use if I were running a business today.
And so do you think retailers are that same percent, like successful retailers are the same percentage art, science, and technology that you sort of lean towards, or do you think that equation is different for retailers?
I think we've seen a bit of a shift. I think with a lot of D2C brands that came up, there was definitely more tech and science, and there was potentially art. But I think we all realize the importance of each. It's hard to really, if you're running a business, have only one skill set, be whether it's all technology or all art. It's funny, I was talking with Mickey Drexler about this the other day, and I asked him this question about art and science. And, Mickey's definitely an art guy, but as he said, a good leader will make sure that he surrounds himself or supports himself with strong candidates, whether it's technology or operations. So you just have to have an appreciation for how a business needs to be run, how to grow a business, the importance of great product, great marketing, great branding, but also the importance of super platforms as well as process and operations. So they're all important. You can't just have one, but you definitely can't survive without the product piece.
Yeah. And so if we were to think about, or like when you kind of mentioned you invest in brands that are kind of incorporating all three things, art, science, and technology. So like, who are brands that you think are just killing it right now?
Well, not necessarily brands I'd invest in. I don't do many brands outside of the public markets where my track record is so, and
Don't accept investing advice.
you
This is
know,
not investing advice.
you hold on too long, you get burned. But if I were looking at brands today that I think are doing it really well, I love what Faraday is doing, both in terms of what they do in their store, what they do online, the way they communicate with the customer. I like their product. They're building community. They're touching on some really important nodes. So I like what Faraday is doing. Also, from a product point of view, I like what Design Within Reach does. And I think that they're also doing smart things within their store. I like how focused they are on curating their assortment. I like the technology they've employed in the store, whether you're online or in the store, you can actually reach a sales associate when you're online. And then when you're in the store, they've actually recently pivoted to a platform that I invested in 7 years ago, which is Predict Spring. They're using their point of sale solution, which really helps create a seamless and frictionless experience for a customer in the store who needs to buy something both online and in the store, which if you're shopping for home, that's a common problem, right? You might want to take a book with you and buy a sofa. So how you place the order, how that's handled, I think is very important. In the active space, I love what Alo Yoga is doing. I think and I know they're adding stores. I've spoken with Chris Blakesley, who's their CEO. I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on Lululemon. I love their product. I think it's well designed, well styled, nicely curated, and the store experience, I find it to be more upscale than some of the others in the active space. So, and then I guess probably, an all-time favorite a brand with whom I worked would be Ralph Lauren. And I think there's a brand that has so much top of mind awareness. They've done an amazing job with their stores, their full price stores, and of course their outlet stores. But they've created this brand that when you close your eyes, you really never think of an item. You just think of an experience. Or if you look at a room, you could say that's a Ralph Lauren room. Or if you see a couple, it could be a Ralph Lauren couple. Like just the way their windows really address the world. And I think they've done a good job embracing technology. Their online experience I find to be quite good. They've even done some things as early adopters using, they work with a platform called Obsess, which allows you to do virtual walkthroughs through their store as well. So I think that they've taken some really smart risks as a brand and addressed both technology, product, online, and stores, and create a great experience.
I love that. So I'm going to stop the share so that you can see Ken's face full blown here with my own. And we're going to like start integrating some questions from the audience since we're at the 15-minute mark. So one of the questions, and again, if you're late to the presentation here, just chat it in either in the QA or in the chat itself. Doesn't matter to me. I'll see it either way. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, it seems like for sure, every week there are retail headlines about inventory issues. We've seen a ton of around that at Nike and Target. And I know even this morning, there's some guidance on Q4 numbers at major retailers like Target that you've been following. So I guess if I could just ask, like, what's your perspective on this? Like, is there anything that retailers should be doing from your opinion to stay out of the headlines, or is this just the world we live in? What are your thoughts?
It is a challenging time. And as we discussed, I think going back to a year ago when you were planning your business a year out and you were running out of this and running out of that. I mean, the home goods people, they probably sold 5 years worth of home product in 19 months. And depending on what company you're working with, you were chasing products. So the planning process, which I've always felt to be truly important, was critical. And how high you planned, how much you thought you needed, how well you were able to forecast, put your inventory in a position where you are today. And it's funny, I know that you're with Twilio. This is a Twilio sponsored webinar, but I've invested in Twilio and I love what Eitan has built, because they take a very simple looking platform that we've all used at one point in time, which is Excel, and they put it into a platform that enables you to really plan your business at an item level based on the different types of delivery schedules or where the product is coming from, top down and bottom up. And it also allows you to forecast. It basically gives you the right tools to plan, forecast, and now allocate product to stores. So I think that's critically important for companies. The better planning, the better adjustments that you can make in time get you out of where a lot of companies are today, which is sitting with inventory. You alluded to the Target's announcement this morning. They announced sales down, and their forecast for fourth quarter to be disappointing. The stock was down about 15%, and they took Macy's, I believe Nordstrom's and Gap down with them. So it will be a tough time. I think we're going to see probably a tough retail period through the first quarter of next year, which means lots of inventory, lots of aggressive markdowns, and retailers doing what they can do to protect their brand, which is always the most important thing. So creative promotions that protect the good product, that get rid of some of the less desirable product, will be critical. But it will be interesting to see how retailers react to what's happening today.
Yeah, and again, this is a Twilio webinar, but no hard sale here. I think one of the things that I'm curious from your perspective on is, I'm newer to retail. I was never a planner, but I have heard that, planning can sometimes be like the forgotten back office function. Do you, and you talk to a lot of CEOs and a lot of very C-suite executives, and I know we have a lot of planners or merchants on the call here. Do you think that they get it? Like, are they looking for more out of the planning function? What are your thoughts? Like, how can we better communicate just how critical inventory is to the executives and like what a core function the planning team has? How can we help bolster the reputation?
Well, listen, inventory is your biggest investment. So any CEO or CFO or COO that doesn't think that planning is an important process and how well you decide on what you need, they probably shouldn't be in that job. So I don't know how to underscore planning any more clearly than that. It's as important as having a good merchant eye. Having a good merchant partnering with a planner, that's a compelling team. And when I was at Gap or any of the companies with whom I worked, planning and merchandising generally worked very closely together. And the closer they work together, I think the better they are. One of the challenges is generally when merchants plan from bottom up, it always exceeds the plan. Top down comes in under the plan. So there's a real balance, but I think having merchants work with planners so that they understand each other, that's how you want to move the business.
Yeah, I love that. And then we have a bunch of questions about kind of the macro stuff that's happening. So one of the questions is really about inflation, right? So I guess just your thoughts on how teams should really be managing to inflation, the recession, all of these sorts of things. You kind of mentioned markdowns a little bit, but anything around IMU or anything that you're working with clients on or have thoughts on there?
Yeah, I think we're going to start to see, I think we're at the peak. We're going to start to see, I think in 2023, probably some deflation. You have some pricing pressures that have gone away, namely your freight, inbound freight. I mean, if you were taking in containers from the Far East just to California, before COVID, containers, a 40-foot container was $3,000 to $3,500. During COVID, that same container was $25,000 to $28,000. Those container prices have come way back down. So if you think about it, if you had $30,000 worth of goods in a container at cost, and now the container costs the same amount as your product versus 10% of your product, you had a lot of built-in pressure to raise pricing to try to protect some IMU. So a lot of that's going away. You do still have some resource pressures on fabric and product, but you're going to see that going down as well as demand starts to subside. So I think pricing, I think we've seen the worst of it. I think the liquidation of product, which we're going to see a lot of over the fourth quarter, that for the consumer will seem like prices are coming back down and maybe make things more available. What Target reported today was that it was inflation that was concerning them on how much the customer would able to buy in light of what they're paying for household goods or gas or what have you. But I think once we get through the holiday season, hopefully we'll start to see some prices coming back down.
Pricing seems like one of those areas where it's like the actual like perfect mix of art and science, right? Because it's not like, oh, inflation's 8%. Let's just raise our prices 8%, right? So how are your clients kind of dealing with just pricing in general? Like, are you doing it item by item? Are you kind of doing categorically? What are you seeing?
It's a good question. I think pricing should always be done on an item by item basis. There are certain thresholds you don't want to break. For example, if your average retail is $50 and you have an item that's $45, you may want to take that up to $49 or $49.50, and you might not want to go over $50. Something that's at $52, you might want to take up to $58. But you do it on an item by item basis. You look at the inventory you have, the turn that you're experiencing, you make a decision based on, and also what's coming in. You do want to make the best possible decisions because you don't want to keep changing prices. There were a number of retailers that probably made 2 or 3 moves during the pandemic. And those were met with little resistance, by the way. Customers were more happy just to get something than they were concerned with what they were paying. Now it's reversed. How much is it? Do I really need it? Did I already buy it? So if there is more markup left to be done, you certainly want to be careful. I think you've passed that point of taking markups already.
Okay, there are a lot of questions asking you for your crystal ball. Are you ready?
Go ahead.
A lot of 2023 predictions. So get ready. And all this caveated with, we're doing our best here. But
I'm off the record.
Yes, off the record. What are the other trends that you're expecting? So I've got questions about store openings. I've got questions about acquisition channels, how those might
Mhm.
shift, layoffs in central offices or
Okay.
specifically merchandising departments. Pretty sure that comes from a merchant. So what other things are you anticipating?
So what I see for stores, because I'm starting to see more stores open again, I think retailers are focusing still on opening stores. I still believe in brick and mortar, but I think a smaller store that has the right combination of technology and product um, is critical. I'd rather have, like, in a city like New York, where back in the days of Gap, we were opening up 7 and 10,000 foot stores on every other corner. I'd rather have, if instead of a 10,000 foot store, I'd rather have 4 2,500 foot stores placed in different areas, creating a brand impression, creating, the right store for the community. So I see smaller stores for retailers and still more retail store growth. Um, as far as mergers and acquisitions, there'll probably be a lot. And we read last night, Tom Ford sold for a cool $2.8 billion. And that's all based on the value of beauty, by the way. I think beauty is an incredibly hot area, and it'll be interesting to see how beauty and even apparel brands potentially come together to create a powerful brand. Much like the way you can even take a look at the way Kohl's brought in, who did Kohl's bring into their stores?
Sephora?
So thank you very much. How they brought in Sephora. I think that's a smart thing to do. But there are a lot of brands out there. I mean, take Gap that just struggles. Why doesn't Gap have a beauty brand? I mean, there's got to be someone they could work with. Um, ELF possibly, which might be more priced along the lines of an Old Navy. But I do love the idea of stores partnering with or augmenting their space with something that complements or provides the customer something that they don't have, because most of these retailers today have more space than they need. So I think that could be potential for merger down the road. And I think there are a number of companies that are probably struggling today that will become targets over the next 3 to 6 months, and we'll see more small companies get gobbled up by bigger companies.
Yeah, I love that. There's a question about kind of KPIs as it relates. There's a lot of stuff about brick and mortar stores in here. I'm trying to consolidate it into a cohesive question for you. But I'll just read a couple of them and you can kind of take it wherever you think fits best. So how do you measure initiatives in a brick and mortar store to show changes towards increased profitability? Like, what are the KPIs, I guess, that justify opening that as a new channel? Or I think the other question is kind of the other way. So if someone is primarily brick and mortar, if they're looking to do more D2C, I think the question is technically, what are the best examples of retailers that are increasing sales by selling beyond brick and mortar while the customer is in store? So that's kind of like, there's this report about how Gen Z buys, where they in store will be looking online for things. So I think it's just that, I think it's like this merging between brick and mortar and D2C. Where do you see this going? What do you see successful?
I would bet, and I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I bet if you went into a Best Buy and you looked at how many customers are shopping or showrooming Best Buy and probably buying product, maybe not even at Best Buy, but elsewhere on their phone as they're comparing prices. I mean, that would be an example of where customers are coming in, they're getting their information, and they're shopping elsewhere. Probably when you get some hot retailers out there, you look at like On Cloud Running, they've done a pretty amazing job coming to this country, mostly wholesale distribution, but they're opening up stores. You go into the store and you can't find what you need, you're buying it online. So it's all a matter of supply and demand. And I think as retailers begin to understand how much inventory they have in their stores, and probably one of the only ways to do that might be through RFID. And I'm very bullish on RFID, invested in an RFID company, Radar. Go Radar, that's their name. But knowing it allows retailers to know exactly what they have. Because one of the challenges retailers have today, and Target reported this also, $2 billion worth of shrink. So goods are walking out of the store. Laws are different than they used to be. And when you don't know what you have, how can you do things like buy online, pick up in store? Customer buys online, says you have it, but it's gone. So RFID actually most accurately measures what's available in store at a point in time. And I think that's critical. Critical to running your business, as critical as planning is to your business. So I see that as being important. But one of the key indicators in store, the two key indicators, traffic and conversion, I'll always come back to that. The traffic you drive into the store and what percent of 100 are you converting from lookers to buyers. That remains to be important. And, there's other metrics as well. There's ways to use video analytics. I work with a company called Deep North. We can actually measure the amount of time associates spend each day with customers in the store versus how much they maybe spend not with customers. So are my associates productive? Are they working closely with customers, or are customers just on a self-guided tour and shopping on their own? And does more association or more contact from an associate with a customer mean more sales? You would think it would, but maybe not. I would think it would.
So I have a very specific question here, which I'm excited to hear your answer to. So there's a person on this call that has to renovate a store and needs to prove that that act deserves the funding. How can they sell this to executives that it's going to increase sales?
So I guess there's a run rate on the store of X. They're going to put a certain amount of money into the store. What they want to show is what the lift to the store would be, the positive comp, the increase, the growth over that run rate. And can that growth pay back the investment in that remodel within an 18-month period? That would be, and now, of course, it's going to be a pro forma. You're going to say, I think this store remodel is going to drive a 10% increase. And at the end of 14 months, I will have made enough money to pay back for the remodel. That's the pro forma, but that's what I would want to see in order to approve a project. And generally, you want to get your money back on a build out within an 18-month period.
Perfect. Very succinct. Okay, so these questions are kind of like back to your intro. And I think this one from Mitch is cool. So if you missed the introduction, maybe a little bit extra, maybe a recap of that would be good too, Ken. But the question is, starting Robot Galaxy in 2008 and ultimately having that be sort of unsuccessful, what did that change for you about the way that you approach business or life, or managing a retailer in a tumultuous environment? Like what did you learn from that?
Probably my greatest learning and the most challenging thing, and for those of you that are starting businesses or thinking about starting a business, when you're asking friends and family to literally write you a check and then you're responsible for that check and it fails, it doesn't feel good. So I have not been a big fan or one to go out and want to raise money. I'm willing to write checks. I've done that, but I've talked to people about starting a fund, and I've tended to shy away from that. I'd rather not be in a position to ask somebody for money. It's a big responsibility to take on, and generally you don't do it unless you put your own money into it. So, on the one hand, I could say if I've invested in 8 to 10 companies, which I have, that's sort of a fund in and of itself. That could be the backbone of a fund, and you'd go out and raise more money. But I think I'd rather just do it for myself than look to bring others in as well. So that was a big learning. But the other big learning is, and I've always felt, anything that I wouldn't do as a leader of a business and ask someone else to do it for me. So I like to experience or understand all the facets of the job, take on whatever is needed, help. could care less what it is. I don't mind rolling up my sleeves. I think experience is important. That's how you know what you're truly up against. So when I was at Robot Galaxy, I mean, my partner and I, Oliver, we did everything from stocking the stores to running out to the warehouse to doing the transfers to working with customers on the floor, filling in for managers, whatever it was. You got to be willing to do everything to certainly to make a startup start.
Yeah. And so we're kind of all over the place now. My thematic combining of questions has officially fizzled. One of the questions is around the inventory pendulum, right? To your point, there was a time not that long ago where there was no inventory on shelves. Now there's an excess. Do you see it swinging back, and how do retailers sort of manage this to get into a less pendulum-y place?
That's crystal ball stuff. I would say this though, if you think about retailers who've done or brands that have done an interesting job with inventory, you take a look at like Supreme, and like they build the brand to run out. They create scarcity. Scarcity is great. It's hard for a merchant because you never want to miss a sale. If you think it's a great item, you want to make sure you have enough. But until you can start to create some scarcity and create demand, that's where you get in trouble. So it sounds so cliche, but it's just having the right balance of product. And running out of product is not a bad thing. It keeps the customer hungry. It keeps product from getting marked down, and it also allows changeover both online and in the store, and showing newness. So I guess that's how I would sum up where the pendulum is swinging. I can't tell you. For some brands that are hot right now, go buy more. For others who are up to the gills, just hope you can push out your receipts long enough that you don't have to take crazy markdowns on good product right now to keep your warehouse flowing its goods.
And you kind of mentioned something that we haven't touched on much during this session, but there is the relationship between merchants and planners, and then the relationship between planning and marketing, right? So like in your mind, how often should these teams be talking to each other? How much should, a promotion on this particular item on this particular day be pulling back into the planning process? What are like the best retailers doing around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely how you bring at the top of a division, the head merchant, the head of marketing. You want to look at what the big buys are, what you want to get behind, or the concepts or themes. A lot of times, again, it's the plans and the merchants are putting things together. You could, at the beginning of a season or the beginning of a buy, while you're walking through merchant, planner, marketing, seeing things at the same time. But then it's up to really the merchants and the planners to put it together. And for the merchant, at least for the companies that I've worked with, to put together what are the key items, the key looks that we want to go after from a marketing perspective. And then how does it tie into the overall marketing calendar?
Okay. And then for attendees, there's a time check here. We've got about 7 minutes left with Ken. We have too many questions to go over. So if I don't get them answered, I'm going to do a recap with Ken afterwards and try to get him to give me all of the answers to all of the burning questions we didn't get to. So I apologize in advance if you don't hear it, but keep them coming. Even if we don't get to them live here, I promise we'll get you some insight. So I'm going to do what I think are rapid fire questions now. One, we are headed to NRF. The big show is happening in January. I know you'll be there. We'll be there too. The question is, what are the must-have techs to consider for mid-sized retailers at the show? What booths does this person have to go to, in your opinion? Shoot.
Well, I mean, after Tulio, I'll tell you, there are a couple things that I like. I'm loving, I work with one platform called Firework, and Firework embeds shoppable video and shoppable live stream in your e-commerce site. So instead of putting your video in TikTok and Reels, put it in your e-commerce site and drive business there. Walmart using it, Gap, Old Navy using it. In fact, in Asia, 20% of all e-commerce is done through live stream shopping. So I think live stream, shoppable video, critically important. From a store perspective, point of sale, I mentioned Predict Spring earlier. I'm still a big believer that a very good POS solution can help make that transaction frictionless, which we all want, which is why many of us stay away and we shop at home online, because we don't have to deal with anybody. We can just select and exit. What else am I like? I'm seeing a lot there's a lot happening with search, a lot of AI ways to improve search online. One company I've invested in is Lily AI, and they auto attribute product, which means they add meta tags, many meta tags, up to 20 per item, which improves your ability to find product online. It enables, and it also improves SEO and SEM. So I think all of these things are important in terms of how you're approaching online, even to a point where are you looking at headless commerce like Fabric, or a marketplace like Miracle. Do you have enough traffic on your site that you can bring third-party product in and do it through a commerce hub or a Fabric marketplace or a Miracle? Big brands are using that from, it's obviously an Amazon approach, but you can look at Crate and Barrel or Pier 1, or J. Crew. Marketplace still being very, very important. On the operations side, what else? RFID, we discussed that. Video analytics, use of space, understanding the patterns of the customer in the store. Deep North actually converts your store. It's more like what Google Analytics is to online, Deep North does for the store, which is super important. So those are all platforms, all areas. They all have competitors. No one has a lock on the business, but it's just a matter of what do you need on a company basis to really move the needle. I mean, is there an ERP that you want to do, which is putting a fork in your eye, if you ask me. But if you don't have an ERP, you need one. And then there's a lot that happens after you have an ERP. So lots of stuff to see at NRF, but go there with a shopping list, because you'll get overwhelmed otherwise.
You draw the line of technology nerdery at ERP. That's a line too far for you. All right. Next question. You brought up AI. So AI, machine learning, big acronyms in tech these days. What do you think? You're a believer, I assume, since you invest in Lily AI, but what else? Do you have any hot takes on the future there?
Yeah, I mean, where AI can help improve the likelihood of a customer purchasing product and how that works with marketing. I've seen it done with Bluecore, uses it very well. I'm not an investor there, but I'm impressed with what they do in terms of how their machine learning can take a look at first-party data and then know how and when to hit the customer to increase the likelihood of a purchase. Understanding like stores AI, or just learning the patterns in the store to better staff your store, critically important. Or understanding, I like this one platform called Find Mine. I'm not an investor, which actually will pair customers. It's when you pick an item, it will show you the 3 or 4 best items to go with it. So it's outfitting. I love that. And again, it's all from machine learning. So different machine learning applied differently can be amazing, and really help convert sales and just provide more information about your business.
Great. All right. Last question. How do you feel about the metaverse? Brand new channel, amazing opportunity for retailers. What do you think?
The metaverse, it's so challenging just to win on Earth. I'd rather be a close second than be a leader in the space. I think like anything, you want to stay aware and know what's going on, whether it's how you're creating, how you're gamifying, if you will, the online experience. Does an NFT resonate with your customer? So there's a lot of things happening out there. It's still incredibly small. And I think it means different things to different brands. Like not every platform is right for every brand. Not every brand will need to be in the metaverse.
That's a great place to end. Thank you so much, Ken. And I've got a special offer for attendees here. So I'm going to re-share my screen really quickly for you all. And Tulio, we are starting a community of retail professionals, but really specifically the back office functions. So planners, merchants, all of us that are trying to create great retail experiences for everyone. And so if you want to join our community, it's like fairly new. So you'll be a founding member of it. You can go to this little link /community and use the referral code KP. That's my buddy, Ken Pilot, and his webinar. Ken, thank you so much for joining us. This was amazing. Thank everyone for coming. Lots of amazing questions. We will document them. Oh, go ahead.
I will say one thing, just as
Yeah.
a final plug. I have worked with companies that I have put on Tulio, and I'm so impressed with how it's helped improve their ability to plan. That's 2 companies with whom I've worked. So I've seen it firsthand. I've used it firsthand. If you're on Excel, get off Excel, get onto Tulio. You will love it. All right, that's my infomercial. I'm done.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ken, for the wisdom and that last plug. We appreciate it, of course. And if you have additional questions you were too shy to ask or whatever, you'll get an email from us with the recording to this webinar and our information. So you just pop them over and I'm happy to continue being your conduit to Ken. Again, I highly encourage you to reach out to him on LinkedIn. He posts very interesting content all the time, really insightful. I've learned a ton from him. So again, thank you everyone and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.